Welcome to Extraterrestrial Mysteries, where we explore the unknown, the extraordinary, and the tales that defy explanation. Today, we journey into one of the most significant UFO abduction stories of the 20th century. It's a story that began on a quiet night in 1961, but would forever alter the lives of Betty and Barney Hill and become a case that still sparks debate today. This is the story of an ordinary couple thrust into an extraordinary situation, an encounter that would ignite the imagination of a generation and challenge the boundaries of science, psychology, and our understanding of the cosmos. Settle in as we recount the Betty and Barney Hill abduction, a modern mystery. September 19th, 1961. The crisp autumn air filled the darkened roads of rural New Hampshire as Betty and Barney Hill, an interracial couple ahead of their time, were on their way home from a well-deserved vacation in Montreal. They were relaxed, the hum of the car engine blending with the low murmur of their conversation, the peacefulness of the night enveloping them. But in an instant their ordinary lives would spiral into an experience neither of them could have anticipated. Betty gazed up at the sky and noticed a bright, glowing light hovering in the distance. At first, she thought it was a star, but as it began to move, her curiosity turned to concern. "Barney," she said, pointing to the light, "that's not a star. It's moving, and it's getting closer." Barney, always pragmatic, reassured her that it was probably a commercial airplane, a normal occurrence on a quiet night like this. But Betty knew something was different. This light wasn't following a typical flight path. It was descending, getting larger and brighter. The light closed in, and soon they realized it was something far more unusual than they had ever seen. They continued driving, but the object seemed to mirror their every movement, following them, almost as if it were stalking them along the winding road. Barney's initial skepticism began to wane as the light grew so close it became impossible to ignore. Tension filled the air. As they neared the small town of Indian Head, Barney made a decision that would mark the beginning of their mysterious encounter. He pulled the car over. He had to get a closer look. Stepping out of the car into the stillness of the night, Betty and Barney were immediately struck by how silent everything had become. It was as if the world around them had stopped, a silence so deep it felt unnatural. There, hovering no more than 100 feet above them, was a large craft unlike anything they had ever seen before. It wasn't just the size of the object. It was the way it moved, silently, effortlessly, as though it was defying the laws of physics. This wasn't any aircraft they had ever seen. It was something else entirely. Barney, taking his binoculars from the car, tried to get a better look. As he focused on the craft, his heart began to race. Inside the windows of the craft, he could see figures, shadowy, humanoid figures, moving around inside. Their heads were large, their eyes even larger, dark and penetrating. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end as fear gripped him. He would later describe feeling an overwhelming urge to approach the craft, as if he was being commanded by these beings through some kind of mental communication. But then, as he took a few steps forward, he stopped cold. His rational mind screamed at him to turn back. Barney hurriedly ran back to the car, shouting, "They're going to capture us!" Fear surged through him as he and Betty sped away, but the craft continued to follow them. It wasn't long before their memories became hazy. The last thing either of them clearly remembered was the craft hovering above their car. After that, everything went blank. When Betty and Barney finally arrived home in Portsmouth, something was wrong. They should have arrived hours earlier, yet they couldn't account for 2 full hours of time. Their watches had stopped, and they had no memory of the 35 miles they had driven after their encounter with the craft. They both felt disoriented, as if they had emerged from a fog. Their clothes were oddly rumpled. Barney's shoes were scuffed in a way he couldn't explain, and Betty's dress was torn. Strange sensations lingered in their bodies, a vague sense of unease that seemed to cling to them. Betty began to experience vivid nightmares, dreams that were unlike anything she had ever had before. She saw herself and Barney being led onto a spacecraft by beings who communicated with them through their minds. These dreams were so intense and so detailed that she couldn't shake the feeling that they were more than just dreams. In the days that followed, the couple couldn't let go of the nagging feeling that something extraordinary had happened to them. Seeking answers, they contacted Dr. Benjamin Simon, a Boston psychiatrist known for his work with hypnosis. Dr. Simon suggested regressive hypnosis to recover the lost memories of that night. What he uncovered would become the cornerstone of the Hill abduction case. Under Dr. Simon's hypnosis, Betty and Barney recounted chillingly similar yet distinct accounts of what had occurred during their lost time. Barney, always the skeptic, was the first to break through the mental fog. His voice shook as he described being taken aboard the ship. He recalled feeling completely powerless, paralyzed as these beings, whom he later referred to as alien doctors, examined him. The beings had large heads, wide eyes, and smooth grayish skin. They communicated with Barney not through speech, but telepathically, instructing him to remain calm as they performed strange medical procedures on him. He remembered the cold, sterile environment of the ship and the instruments they used, but what disturbed him most was the way they looked at him. Their large eyes seemed to peer straight into his soul, probing his thoughts and emotions with an intensity that left him deeply shaken. Betty's account, though similar, was more detailed. She described being examined on a cold metal table by the beings, one of whom she believed to be their leader. They communicated with her through images and feelings, showing her a map of stars, what she would later refer to as a star map. Betty recalled asking the leader where they were from, and he pointed to a specific area on the map. Though she didn't understand it at the time, years later, researchers would compare her description to a real star system, Zeta Reticuli. The consistency between their stories, especially considering they were hypnotized separately, led Dr. Simon to believe that something traumatic had indeed happened to them. But whether it was an actual extraterrestrial encounter, he could not say. The Hill abduction case first came to public attention when a Boston journalist leaked their story to the press in 1965. Almost overnight, Betty and Barney found themselves at the center of a media frenzy. Their story was splashed across newspapers, radio shows, and television broadcasts, quickly becoming one of the most famous UFO abduction cases in history. The couple's experience was later chronicled in the best-selling book, The Interrupted Journey by John G. Fuller, which was followed by the made-for-television movie, The UFO Incident in 1975. As the first widely publicized alien abduction case, the Hill's story sparked intense public interest and debate. It influenced popular culture and led to a wave of similar reports from people claiming to have had abduction experiences of their own. But while the Hill's account gained many supporters, it also drew a fair share of skeptics. Some psychologists suggested that the couple's experience was nothing more than a shared hallucination, a psychological coping mechanism for the stress they were under as an interracial couple in 1960s America. Others theorized that Betty's vivid dreams had influenced Barney's recollections under hypnosis. Still, others pointed to the possibility that the entire episode was a fabrication, a story crafted for attention or financial gain. Yet despite the skepticism, the Hills never wavered in their account. Until his death in 1969, Barney insisted that the experience was real. Betty, who lived until 2004, remained a staunch believer in the truth of their encounter. Decades later, The Hill abduction case remains one of the most well-documented and highly scrutinized UFO encounters in history. Researchers, skeptics, and UFO enthusiasts alike have pored over the details of their story, seeking answers to the questions that still linger. What really happened on that lonely stretch of road in New Hampshire? Was it an extraterrestrial encounter? A psychological anomaly? Or something else entirely? One theory suggests that the Hills were part of a covert government experiment, possibly related to mind control programs like MKUltra. Some UFO researchers point to the precision and clinical nature of the medical examinations, the Hills described as evidence of human involvement, rather than alien. But no definitive proof has ever been uncovered to support these claims. Another mystery that endures is the star map that Betty described under hypnosis. In 1969, an amateur astronomer named Marjorie Fish analyzed the map and concluded that it matched the Zeta Reticuli star system, located 39 light-years from Earth. This led to speculation that the beings who abducted the Hills may have come from that distant star system, although this remains highly controversial. To this day, the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case continues to fascinate and confound. It raises profound questions about the nature of reality, memory, and the possibility that we are not alone in the universe. Whether you believe their story or not, the Hills' experience challenges us to confront the unknown and reminds us that, in a vast and mysterious cosmos, there is still much we have yet to understand. Now, the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case is a landmark in UFO lore, a story that blurs the line between fact and fiction, the known and the unknown. It remains a touchstone for those who seek the truth about extraterrestrial life. But whether this was truly a close encounter or something far more earthly, one thing is certain: the mystery endures. Thank you for joining us today on Extraterrestrial Mysteries. Be sure to tune in for our next episode, Alien Autopsies, Fact or Fiction, where we'll dive deep into another captivating chapter of the unknown. Were these alleged autopsies scientific breakthroughs or clever hoaxes? Find out next time as we continue to explore the mysteries of the cosmos.